Hear me loud and clear. First of all, congratulations on the launch of the platform. It's great to see all those wonderful videos that we've been working on, and yeah, I'm proud of those of you that I know, and also of those of you that I don't. I'm Lucas, and I am a colleague of Nikolai with And Learning, and I'm also a PhD fellow at the Danish School of Education, where, among other things, I look at communities of teachers, and I look about how we can strengthen local teaching practices by sharing more. Because, as Nikolai was also saying earlier, teaching, unfortunately, tends to be in very isolated blocks. But as we also know, no man is an island, no woman is an island. And I think peer practice and VPAL, especially this platform, is one of the actually first really steps in trying to build bridges between teaching practices and opening up that black box. So I won't talk more about the project. You've heard enough about that. I'm going to get into specifics. I'm going to talk a little about didactics because, as you've heard from some of the others, there's some echo when you talk. All right, I'll try to talk slowly to avoid maybe some of the echo. Let me know if it gets bad. But I'm going to talk more about the didactic dimensions of VPAL to talk about how you can use your videos not only to learn about your own practices or other people's practices, but also actually to begin thinking more deeply about why you do as you do, what you do, how you do it, all those questions. So if we look at what didactic means, its origins come from communication and mediation, and it's really about the who's, what's, where's, and how's of teaching. It was developed in the 17th century, and there are two different traditions of didactics. I won't go into those. All I will say is that in the VPAL community, we are focusing on the tradition known as continental didactics, which is focused very much about using teaching as an opportunity for learning and not so much about instructing. So if you have any questions, we can always discuss that. But I want to jump into the videos. All right. So a quick note, as I think some of you noted, working with adult learners can be different than working, for example, with children. The reason for that is that many adult learners are very diverse. They come from different backgrounds. I know that some of you work with, for example, students from refugee backgrounds, etc., which makes it very important to reflect about who your learners are. They are often responsible and autonomous, motivated for particular reasons, which makes this idea of generic courses difficult. They have plenty of life experience and free will. Younger students also have free will, but I think it's very clear among adult learners. And I know you all know this, but I think it's important to keep those factors in mind when we move into discussing this notion of didactics and how it can help. So what we did to help support you in the VPAL community was that we tried developing what we work with as the didactic diamond model. So this is based on research into pedagogical theories and research into pedagogical practice. And this model is really about trying to support how you, when you make your videos, when you watch videos, when you participate in communal sharings, and again, this doesn't have to be online. So you can also use this model elsewhere. I just think it fits very well with the VPAL community, that when you do all these things, this model can help you become aware of what you do and spread it out across the different steps. In other words, unpack your practice. So the didactic model consists of a diamond, unsurprisingly, with 6 steps, 6 dimensions. And it's important that you don't think of the model as a chronological model, but more as themes that you can address while you think about or develop your practice. So on the one hand, we have learning conditions. And I'm just going to switch slide here so you can see them all. I know there's a lot of text on this slide. Don't worry, I'll quickly go through it. On the one hand, we have learning conditions, which addresses both the participants and your own preconditions for learning. This also includes potential weaknesses or strengths in the backgrounds of the students. Then we have structural conditions, which would point to the more formal requirements of the practice, not only formal in terms of what level are we teaching at. So you'll notice that most of the practice videos, they begin with saying, for example, this is good for B1 students, B2 students, clarifying what are the formal kind of requirements around it. But it's also good for discussing what kind of resources you need, how you understand that participants know what you're saying, maybe some translation is required, etc. Purpose and goals on the right side addresses the intention with the practice, the goals you have, and also what you hope to achieve or enable. So not just the formal goals, but also kind of what's the type of mentality, or what's the cognitive development, or what's the motivational aspects of using this practice, which are very important, I think, to state. Content, unsurprisingly, is about the content of the practice. But as you can see when you look at the diamond, it's also about what forms of participation you use. So forms of participation would refer to, for example, do you use group work? Is it individual tasks? Is it lecturing, in front of a blackboard? And kind of reflecting about why do you actually do as you do? Because I think a lot of practices begin just from doing what you've always done, which is many times is very helpful. But VPAL and this whole platform is also about challenging those assumptions and challenging what you normally do and expanding your repertoire in terms of being able to apply different models and ideas for teaching. And I hope you can see how VPAL can do that. All right, process is about, for example, ensuring the participants' opportunities for participating along the way. So in other words, it's about the steps in the practice. How do you move from part A to part B to part C? And evaluation is about the quality criteria and how you follow up on those. So how can you evaluate? How can you summarize? How can you use this practice to build upon something else, etc.? All right. I know that was a lot. Again, as Charlotte also said, I think you will get these slides afterwards, so you can read into all these aspects. Because right now, what I want to focus on primarily is actually on the feedback dimension. And as I will go into more deeply now, what we hope to do with the VPAL platform, what we all hope to, is, of course, not only share practices, but create an opportunity for you to comment on each other, to build connections. As the panel was discussing before, people quickly find their teaching heroes, their favorites that they really like. And I think celebrating each other is a very, very underrated aspect of a lot of teaching practice. So the diamond model, as I will say now, can also be used for that. Sharing is caring. Now, one of the reasons that we want to give feedback and comment on the VPAL platform generally, whether you use the diamond model or not, is that a lot of research into this field, just as locally at schools, the same applies online, that over and over again, teachers who share and reflect on their work often have a higher level of well-being, and they also generate better learning results. In other words, teachers that reflect, that share, that comment on work, they do also feel more satisfied with their work and perform better, generally speaking. Now, VPAL is, of course, as you know, not only for sharing, but also, again, to begin reflecting on why you do as you do, unpacking your own assumptions, as I was saying before. And what I'd like to do now is that I'd like to show you a video from the platform, and I'd like to try to illustrate how you can use the diamond model to actually give that kind of feedback. And an important kind of disclaimer here is that I'm not a language teacher. I do have a lot of teaching experience, but not with adult learners in terms of language. And the feedback that I can give is only as specific as I can kind of say generally. And I know, and you're going to try this out afterwards, that you can give much more direct and concrete feedback to each other because you know a lot of the challenges that each others are facing. All right, so without further ado, I think we should have a look at Benjamin's video, who I am sure will approve that we show it.
Hey guys, this is Benjamin from Denmark, and it's time for my second peer practice video. This one is called Alto Dictate, and it's together with my group of B1 students. This practice is good for summing up and practicing keywords of a lesson. And it's a fun way of practicing your spelling and listening and pronunciation skills. What you need ideally whiteboards for all students, or you can use A3 paper, and you need markers. Of course, you also need your content words printed out on small pieces of paper, which you then hand out to your students. Hej klasse! Vi skal lave næste øvelse. Den hedder Alto Dictate. I har alle fået en tavle, og nu får I nogle ord, som I skal skrive. En kursist læser et ord, og alle de andre skriver det. Bagefter tjekker I, om det er rigtigt. I får lidt hjælp her. Hvis I ikke kan høre, hvad de andre kursister siger, så har I nogle sætninger. For eksempel, kan du gentage?
Kan du sige det igen?
Kan du sige det igen?
Prende. Prende.
Prende.
Prende. Prende. Prende. Yes.
Det er rigtigt.
Ja.
Prende.
Prende.
Brænder.
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 Prende.
Brænder.
Prende.
Brænder.
Et brød op. Et brød op. Ja.
Et bryllup. Some of the benefits of this practice is that the students get to practice their reading, their pronunciation, and the other students, the ones listening for the word, of course they have to listen and write the correct word. So in many ways this is an all-around good practice. Make sure that people they ask for clarification in the target language. The students had trouble decoding and understanding what the words meant and what the other people were saying because they just didn't know the words. So keep it simple, and it'll be more fun and easier for both you and for your students. So go for it, have fun. Hi.
All right. We are back. Thank you, Benjamin. Online applause. Very inspiring video. I think it's a very simple but very efficient exercise. I hope you all agree. Alto Dictate. I would definitely use that if I could. Anyhow, so looking at this practice, returning to this notion of feedback, if we take the diamond model and try to convert it into using it for providing feedback, I think it can be a very useful way to kind of frame how to think about what you're seeing, how to think about how it can be applied in your own context. So if we take the different steps of the model, which again, I know this is a lot of, there are a lot of words, and the model before you probably didn't get to read it very thoroughly, but I hope you'll let me show it anyway. So if we look at learning conditions, for example, in this video, we could ask if you sense which kind of students the exercise might help. Would it help to know more about the teacher's personal background? So in a practice like this, I think it's not super relevant to know much more about, for example, Benjamin's background, what he's done before, which kinds of students the exercise might help. It was mentioned that it might be for students who have it can be difficult to note words, or especially in the Danish language where there's a lot of strange spelling ways in terms of pronunciation. And I think Benjamin did a good job in kind of legitimizing why this practice can be important for students who have a difficult time doing that. One thing we didn't get to know much about, and I think this could be a point of reflection, is, why this exercise for this particular group of students? What was their background? What was the student's background? One could think about that. If we look at structural conditions of the video, we could ask if the prerequisites for the practice were discussed. So in terms of what time of the day was this? Is this a good exercise in the morning or in the evening? When is this a good thing to do? Could it be a part of a larger kind of set of practices? Is it a good break away from for example, Blackboard teaching? Kind of placing the practice in the context. We could, of course, know more about that, but I think because this exercise is so generically useful, it's a great kind of practice just to show like that. One could also ask if it could have been conducted using different materials or resources. So, purpose and goals. Do you get a general sense of why it is important? Could the practice potentially be used for other purposes? And do the goals seem feasible and achievable? I would be curious, based on this, for example, to know if this practice could also be used with longer sentences. I do miss a little reflection about, what could it also be used for? Because I think the format that Benjamin is showing, the way of using the dictate, of using, speaking and writing down, I think that's an excellent format. So if I were commenting on this, I would maybe propose, or I would write a question regarding, is it possible to use this in other types of exercises? I think that would be a good question to ask. Now, looking at the content, you would be able to, for example, ask the videos about, is there any content that's particularly inspiring? You could comment on that. Are the choices of content reflected on, and could have been conducted using other forms of participation? I think in this exact video, one thing I am missing a little is why the exact words were chosen. So why were brand or some of the other words that you saw in the video, why were those words chosen? And I could, for example, suggest, would it be possible to maybe source words from the students? Maybe that's actually what Benjamin did. You don't know, but asking that kind of a reflective question can be a good way to push forward the practice and to begin reflecting upon, okay, when I develop my own materials, where do I get my contents from? I think that's an important point of reflection. Now, if we look at the process, we could ask if the participants were involved. And I think in Benjamin's case, the participants did seem very involved. If the teacher's reflections made clear how the practice proceeds, so how does it begin? How is it in the middle? Again, I think Benjamin does an excellent job showing with the video what happens, but I think we could use a little more reflection about, why proceed like this? For example, how many words, how many exercises can you do before they maybe begin feeling tired, some of the learners or the students? How do you ensure that they, for example, keep speaking Danish and avoid the temptation to translate or help each other or show the paper? I think, again, Benjamin shows it, but we could hear even more reflection about it. And this would be a good thing to discuss in the comment section, for example. All right, the last point, evaluation. Do you see the success criteria? Which outcomes seem most important? And is it clear what kind of activities could follow the practice? Again, I do think, yes, in Benjamin's case, to all those, it's very clear which outcomes are in focus. And if you wanted to, you could comment, for example, how could you follow up on this practice? That would be a good kind of question to ask. So again, summing up, I hope all this can be used as a way for you to see how you can begin using the videos as a way to reflect upon your own practice and to, of course, help your colleagues be even more sharp in terms of what they do, why they do it, etc. And this feedback diamond, I hope, can help you do that. So in a minute, you're going to go into groups and try it out yourselves. And of course, now we're just going to have some questions if you have any, and I can elaborate a little. I don't know if we have time to just briefly show this, but I did also make this kind of suggestion file where I just put in some of the types of comments you could make under each of them, right? So this is just a bunch of examples of comments that I found from the VPAL platform or other comments that you could use, right? So these are all comments that I think are very good from the platform that show
Thank you
how
so
you can give
much.
didactic feedback.